know what time it is? Do y'all really know what time it is? It's time to grab your popcorn, grab your best beverage. It's time to relax your ears. Wrestling season has returned, baby.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's time for your main event. Coming down the aisle, we have the one, Bobby Wrestles. And he is accompanied by the beautiful Mia Moore. This is the main event. Welcome to the All About Wrestling podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I come to you with a midday research show. A few topics I'd like to talk about, but first I want to give some respect to you guys in the chat. Tantalizing Tony, hello, good afternoon, bro. Ellie Underdown, thanks for joining us again, as well as Mike D. And of course, one of our moderators, Fandito. How are you? Good afternoon. Folks, two topics I want to talk about, okay? Our subtopic is 80s wrestling. So my question to you is, what was better, 80s wrestling or today's wrestling? And now, I do know that we're all of different ages. We're all of different eras when it comes to us being fans and watching wrestling. I also understand that my perspective of 80s wrestling could be a little bit clouded, and I'll explain why once we dive deeper into that topic, okay? But our main topic is WWE back with another lawsuit. That's correct. WWE pyrotechnics lawsuit. All right. So apparently there's been a fan that has come out and claims that he's been injured from pyrotechnics. All right. And these pyrotechnics occurred last WrestleMania. Okay. I think, this is interesting because we all go to wrestling events, whether it's independent wrestling or major promotions, right? This lawsuit was filed in January of this year, all right? So we're about a month behind, but I do want to get your thoughts. And there's a poll. I did post a poll in the live chat, folks. If you can answer that. Is there a reasonable expectation of care at a live wrestling event? All right, and what I mean by that is when we go to these shows, right? These major companies, do we expect to have an expectation of care? Should these corporations, these companies go out of their way to ensure that we're safe? All right, keep in mind that these are private companies, with the exception of WWE. They did go public. Okay, they have shareholders. They're no longer considered a private company. They're a corporation. All right. So that's what we're going to talk about. And of course, our subtopic, like I mentioned a while ago, wrestling in the 80s. Now, I did do a poll in reference to that. I'll put that up on the screen. So I asked the contenders, I asked you guys on Instagram, what's better? Now, this was early this morning. I stopped the poll. From what I understand, there's been more pollers because the original post I failed to take down. It ended up being 80s wrestling 70% to 30% wrestling today. Now, this could be objective because, again, we're all different ages, right? Depending on, when we enjoyed wrestling the most, what time frame was that? So that's something to think about. So let's talk about our first topic. All right, let's get back on track here. All right, so I want to go over some of these comments right now. Thanks for joining us. And before I even get to that, Grandma Daisy, I don't know if you're out there. From what I understand, the last show you were commenting, we did not see these comments until we went back and watched the chat replay. So I don't know if you're posting now. We don't see the post. We don't see the chat. I don't know what's going on. If you are chatting now, we don't see those. But Grandma Daisy is one of our biggest supporters. Just want you to know that I appreciate you, all right? So let's talk about this. So Fandito, all right, so you feel like though some who claim they were injured by Pyro could be lying, whereas at, let me see, 8 WrestleMania fans really were hurt by Undertaker Pyro when he beat Edge. Okay. Ellie Underdown, she states, didn't AEW put a disclaimer saying it's your fault if our wrestler hurts you landing on you in the front row? Did they say that? It's your fault if our wrestler hurts you landing on you in front row. Now, a disclaimer, if the disclaimer's out there, it could excuse them from some portion of responsibility. All right, so that's something to think about. It's really something to think about. So in the news article, this is from Ringside News, by the way. Lawsuit filed by a fan who claims he was injured at WrestleMania 38. WrestleMania 38 was at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, right? Marvin Jackson, that's the complainant's name, claims he lost most of his hearing to his left ear. Okay, this was the April 3rd night. So guys, you could do a little research. I know WrestleMania was a 2-night event. April 3rd, that was the night, whether that's the first or the second night. He claims he was seated next to the stage. All right. He's suing for negligence, gross negligence, and he claims that WWE knew of the risk involved. And then that's when I asked, should there be a reasonable expectation of care? Now, so far, 100% of you says yes. There should be a reasonable expectation of care for us. So, if I go to a wrestling event, I'm good. I should just chill out. The company's got me. Is that what you're saying? I disagree with that. I believe that, we should not completely put our guard down, and we still retain some responsibility to our care, right? I mean, come on. That's like saying if we walk down the street and we get hit by a stray bullet. Should we expect a reasonable expectation for, to be taken care of from the city? And that's just my perspective. And again, I'm trying to be as objective as possible. You guys, you got your own perspectives and opinions, which are very valuable. I'm not saying no one's wrong here, but it's something to consider. It's something to consider. All right, phone lines are open. If you guys want to call in and talk about this, I think it's interesting. I mean, WWE is getting hit with a barrage of lawsuits, and there's no one in sight. I mean, considering you're a large company like that, you got to expect this. I mean, you're a large international corporation. You are. And let me see here. Got going on. Ellie Underdown. Trying to get to your comment. I see it here. All right, we got a caller. This is the All About Wrestling podcast. Who's on the line?
It is Fandito.
Fandito. Great to have you, bro. How are you?
Nothing much. Just doing good, doing our thing.
Okay, so what are your thoughts about this topic? I mean, guy claims he was injured by pyrotechnics at WrestleMania last year.
He knew the risk. Now, if this really happened, I'd like to see proof, because in 2008, WrestleMania 24, if you recall, when The Undertaker won and his pyro was going off, there was proof that fans got hurt. Where's this fan's proof? He's saying he waited until this year to file a claim. Why is that? Why did he wait that long when he should have already been doing it? Because in 08, those fans that got injured, they went ahead and they started telling them to start a lawsuit on WWE right away. So why did this fan wait a full year right when WrestleMania is 39 is about to happen?
So you think he's lying?
Yes.
You think he's lying? All right, let's say he did get hurt. Let's say let's say he did get hurt. Do you think WWE should be at fault if he did?
No, because he knew the risk when he went.
Okay, so you get a ticket to the stage at WrestleMania. Do you think he should have had ear protection, perhaps?
No, because let's be frank. A lot of us have been close to the stage, right?
Right.
A lot of us have had pyro go off around us when we're at the stage. Should we have been wearing hearing protection? I mean, we can still hear fine. It's just a case of he's just at the wrong place, and he expected to be taken care of when he knew the risk of sitting at the stage.
Okay, you make a great point. Because the wrestlers, they walk right past it. Sometimes the wrestlers get scared as hell. You see them jump.
That's right.
So you make a great point. Great point. What are your thoughts about 80s wrestling? That's the subtopic. 80s wrestling in the 80s. Is it better in the 80s or is it better today?
I love the 80s wrestling because 80s wrestling makes you invest in every move. They didn't have to do too much. Less was more. They like this last Sunday, I was at New South wrestling Broken Hearts and Broken Faces, and I watched the match. Marty Clay versus a guy that was great, and both of them didn't do much. They made the crowd invest in collar and elbow. They made the crowd invest in kicks, made them want to see more, and they gave them less, and still got the crowd invested. That's what 80s wrestling would do.
So what's your greatest, if I can ask, who's your greatest wrestler from the 80s, if you'd like to share?
Macho Man Randy Savage. Woo, yeah.
Macho Man Randy Savage, a legend.
And the little no fact, he was here in Lexington, Kentucky.
So there's the poll there, and I guess you're part of the majority, Fandito. 60% said 80s wrestling is better than today. Now, of course, we have to keep in mind, a lot of the newer generation watches today's wrestling and a lot of the older generation. And in my opinion, wrestling has gotten much more real with AEW and the ratings in terms of being rated PG-13, mature audience, and that of the sort.
Yes.
Do you think athletically today's wrestling is superior to the 80s wrestling?
Athletically, I would say yes, because back then in the 80s, you only had a handful of athletic guys like Macho Man, Rick Rude, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and just a few that were athletic. But let me ask you this. Could they stand inside the ring for a man like Hardy Race? One of the guys that could throw a stiff punch right to the face. Would they be able to handle that?
I don't know, because you make a great point. I mean, back then, wrestlers were tough. They were tough.
Yes, they were. Even
though you don't see the pizzazz and the high flying and stuff like that, they were tough, and they could take a punch.
Yes, they could. So, remember in 2011, Mystico sprained his finger and called off the match. Well, in the 80s, if wrestler sprained his finger, he wasn't going to call off the match. He's going to be throwing punches with that same hand that had that sprained finger.
Absolutely. Fandito's are one of our moderators, folks. Fandito, before you go, please let our viewers know where they could find you in your platform.
They can find me on YouTube, Fandito, Fandito. And you can find our podcast, Nice Game Podcast, on Facebook. Just type in Nice Guy Andy Podcast. Or you can find it on YouTube and on Twitch and on Spotify. All of it is Nice Game Podcast. And you can also find us on Twitter. You can find my idiot, Warhouse, whoa, boo, sticky brother on Twitter.
Calling in, bro.
You're welcome, brother.
All right. That's Fandito, guys, from Kentucky. Calling in. I love to have him on the show, and he's one of our moderators. He does so much for us. Ellie Underdown. Correct. Savage did have, he had a contract with a major league team, if I'm correct. If you guys want to check that out or look that up. He was good. So in terms of 80s wrestling, I did do a little bit of research. All right. And these were a list of 10 of the worst things about the 80s wrestling. And this is from Sportster.com. The source is in our show description if you want to go and check them out. There's a link there. So I wrote down a few things. I didn't write all 10 down. But one thing that stuck out to me was syndication, right? So, of course, with the storylines of wrestling back in the 80s, every show wasn't televised. So if you wanted to maintain and be informed on the storylines and the direction of what's going on in those wrestling organizations, you had to go to the live shows. All right, because if you didn't, from TV show to the next TV show will be a big lapse in you missing what happened and what transpired in that storyline. Another thing I put was weak finishers. And this is subjective, right? But just think about it. Hulk Hogan's leg drop. It was magical because, you get hit with a leg drop and you're out. You're done. When Hogan hit that leg drop on you, no matter who you are, how big you are, you're done. You're done. That was like the golden rule. If Hogan hits his leg drop on me in this match, I lose, right? So weak finishers, and that's subjective. I mean, in my opinion, yes, a leg drop, it was weak, all right, for you to just defeat every single person. In today's time, you do a leg drop, and you don't go for a pin. You do not go for a pin. Let's see here. Ellie Underdown was a non-NWA promotion, wasn't it? An outlaw promotion. Yeah, so that's another thing. Less entrance music. Wrestlers used to walk out with no entrance music at all. I mean, look at Andre the Giant. He would just walk out. Bullying. Bullying, of course, also known as ribbing. They would take your equipment, hide it, defecate in it, hide your cars. There was no rules. People were brutal back then. I mean, that's just the way it was. And now there's rules in place. You can't do that anymore. You can't be mean. If you're going to fight, can't be on our property. There's protections in place for wrestlers, whereas in the past, they didn't exist. Fandito, I agree. Macho Man's diving elbow was a true finisher too. I don't think I'm getting up from that at all. Andre had no music. He'd walk out, and if he don't like you, he'd yes, he would. Yes, he would. Andre took no stuff. Matches were slow paced, right? Steroids, for the most part, there were no policies in place that prevented you from taking steroids. If you wanted a certain look, if the promoter wanted a certain look, he would advise you to take steroids. That's just the way it was. Sexism. This is huge. This is huge. Back then, there was a wrestler. It was a female wrestler. If you wanted to make it in the wrestling business, you had to see Grandma. You know who Grandma was? Folks in the chat, enlighten me. Let me know your opinion. Let me know your answer. There was one wrestler, and I'm pretty sure you know who she was because they named the whole tournament after her. And then when the information got out, they had to rename the tournament. You know who I'm talking about. But there were not a lot of opportunities for women back then. There really wasn't. Fandito says, not all ribs are bullying. Some were harmless, like Owen Hart's. Ellie Underdown. Wrestling always been like that. If it was a shoot, Eric Bischoff would have slept half the WWE roster. Black belt in judo and karate. Ellie Underdown, you're always on point. Yes. The fabulous Moolah. Folks, there's stories, there's allegations that the fabulous Moolah was responsible for holding down a lot of promising woman talent in the wrestling business. A lot of people that were stars, or at least had the potential to be a star. And it was crazy, but it was Mae Young, from what I understand. Am I correct? Or the Moolah, one and the same. What am I talking about? And then, of course, racism. Racism, you could say anything. You can go off at the tongue. Nobody would make you hold it. And you had to man up, because if you didn't man up, you'd be out of a job. Racism ran rampant back then in the 80s. And of course, times have changed. There's protections in place. And wrestling fans have changed. You know, wrestling fans, for the most part, support equality. So I do have a few announcements, guys. We have two major announcements, and Mia Moore's not here. So I think I should hold on to them. I kind of want her to be a part of these announcements. They're huge. One probably bigger than the other. But there is something I want to share with you. So we've been changing our Instagram. We're making some changes. If you go to our Instagram account, please follow us there. It's no longer All About Wrestling Now. It's All About Wrestling Podcast. One word. And there's an option. If you go to our description, our biography, there's a link, or there's something that pushes you to a page where it asks you some questions. Folks, if you can, it asks you about a t-shirt. You know, what's your t-shirt size? We'd like to get that information, because one of our announcements deals with t-shirts and our future ability to be able to produce custom t-shirts. All right, please share that information. It may direct you to our website. We're on Instagram at All About Wrestling Podcast. All right, check that out. Check our description and fill out that information. All right, that way we'll have this information on file. All right, so that's going to be beneficial to you. Also, Grandmom Daisy, if you remember weeks ago, we made a bet. And the bet was that if I lost, and I did lose, I lost to Mia Moore, I would have to dress up and do a show as a wrestler. I've done this before. Fandito, you remember, I had on a mask. It was terrible. The mask didn't fit right. It was uncomfortable. But yeah, I have to dress up like Doink the Clown, and that's Grandmom Daisy's decision. I do have the products. I'm waiting for one more part of it. And you guys can expect that show within the next few weeks. All right. So, folks in the chat, let's look at our poll. Our poll, 100% of you said, yes, 80s wrestling was better. That's everyone. All right. So this has been a weekly show, an afternoon research show. This is, me coming in quick, dropping in, talking to you guys. Guys, thanks for tuning in. And please follow us on Instagram, please. We post a lot of content daily, at least once, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And we're also going to start doing Instagram lives. All right. So Fandito, Ellie Underdown, Grandma Daisy, wherever you are, Mike D, thanks for tuning in. Tantalizing Tony, make sure you check out the Tantalizing one. Tantalizing Tony show. He has a channel on YouTube. All right, folks. I will catch you guys later. Take it easy.